Misha here, and recently we've done a video or two on the German Heckler & Koch MR556A4, and I promised you a history video on it, and it is coming. But in the comments we also kind of talked about the LMT MARS piston version, specifically my Estonian R20 Rahe, whatever, hail, in which I like better. And I will do a direct comparison, but let's break it up a bit. Instead of having an hour and a half long video doing a deep dive, let's do a video looking at the history of the HK, and then we'll do a comparison video. But let's do this video kind of catching up with the Estonian rifle here, because we actually first shot this and first talked about it at the old cabin before it was remodeled a few years ago. And, you know, I wonder if some things have changed. How are the guns doing in service? How many more have they bought or not? Who is actually using these or not? And, maybe most importantly on a more personal level, what do I think of this now? Because I have had it out the range quite a few times between that original video and this one. It's had a good number of rounds through it. Have I had any failures, stoppages? You know, in more recent years, there's been a little bit of accusation of LMT falling off on their QC and whatnot. Has that been my experience? And with most of these, we'll be shooting Phoenix 55 grain brass cased ammo. We will probably also use some old arms core I've got knocking about, but mostly it's the Phoenix. A, because it seems to just work and everything, and B, I can get it for a reasonable price. So, all I can say is it's worked well for me, so if you want, check them out. And if you'd like to help support us get more ammo and do more things, check out Patreon, or just like, share, subscribe, and comment. Comments help a lot on YouTube. But yeah, let's just, dive in and kind of reacquaint ourselves with the Estonian. This is the R20 so-called reference rifle that LMT did. I don't know if they're still doing them, but back when the contract was granted in 2019, 2020, nothing else was going on in the world at that time. Yeah, how's it holding up? And is it still my favorite piston AR type, or have something else kind of surpassed it since then? Find out. History and background. Estonia is a small country. They're not going to probably produce guns themselves. It's actually quite good that they had a contract to kind of have a custom version of another gun, and what they did. And the R20 actually replaced this, or at least a version of this. Estonia was part of the Soviet Union. It was under the Warsaw Pact. So, used Makarovs and AKs and whatnot. But after all that fell apart, 1992, the very young Estonian self-defense force, just a few thousand people, looked around, what do we need to buy, get a ring of AKs, and they wanted to join NATO. This is a common trend. It needs to be a NATO couple. They went with the Israeli, at that time still IMI Galil. This is an ARM. I know they also had some SARs. They may have also picked up some of the ARs. Either way, it was a 5.56 gun, but in other ways, it was very Kalashnikov adjacent. Still a long stroke gas piston, 2-lug rotating bolt, something they're pretty familiar with, and it was available. I'm not going to say it was a rush job picking these up, but, they didn't take a whole lot of time. But then again, there weren't a lot of options on the market in the early 90s, especially on their budget. They would also pick up some G3s to use as a DMR, or more specifically, some of the Swedish-made under license AK-4s, presumably to replace some SVD Dragunovs or something else similar they had. I'm not really sure. It could have been PSLs. And those were the kind of two main guns. Now, keep in mind, their military at this point is just a few thousand men strong, and they do have conscription. So even of those, they're kind of cycling in and out. At this time, they really don't even have special forces. That would come about around 2008, and they would set up commando units, the usual suspects, and they would eventually purchase some HK G36s for those guys. I know they had some Ks, they may have had some Cs, and they may have had some G36Es, the full-size version. But somewhere in the 2008 to 2012 time period, they picked up some. But it was a small number. Their special forces, even today, are 1 to 200. Back then, probably even less. So it's very likely these were picked up in double digits or very low triple-digit quantities. So the G36 kind of joins the roster there. But in 2014, they really start to expand their military because, well, guess what? Estonia has a border with Russia. And this is when Crimea happens. They start getting armor and new artillery. And eventually this leads to an announcement in 2017. Hey, we're going to open up trials to select a new service rifle to replace the Galil, the G36, and the AK-4G3. And while they don't want a one-size-fits-all rifle, I mean, this isn't the USA M14 joke, they do want kind of a common platform. You know, as much interoperability as parts as can be, maybe swappability, and to come from the same maker. So basically, we're going to pick one manufacturer. We're going to get two basic models, one in 5.56 as an infantry, and one in 7.62 NATO as a DMR, heavy hitter, what have you. So they put out a tender, and roughly a dozen companies respond with offers, kind of looking at their current products. Minor tweaking to meet Estonian needs is done, but basically off-the-shelf things. And by the end of that year, Estonia begins some field testing evaluation, and by 2018 it's really down to 3 competitors. You have Sig Sauer with their 7.16, you have HK with their 4.16, no surprise there, presumably the A5 are very similar, and you have Lurch Machine and Tool Defense, LMT Defense, with their MARS series, modular ambidextrous rifle system. And that gets us to the Rahe. I could be wrong, but it doesn't really seem like the Sig Sauer 7.16 was in serious consideration, because what you really see are talks between the LMT MARS, you have the MARS L 5.56 type, and you have the MARS H in the 7.62 type, and the HK 4.16, 4.17 combo. Those seem to be the ones you kind of talk about. And I don't know why they went with the LMT exactly over the HK, but I can tell you the trials, yeah, they looked at regular environmental things, you know, especially colder weather. They really tested in all kinds of environments, deployments, you know, with conscript soldiers, because, again, they have to do conscript military. Usually the term of service is 8 to 11 months, typically. They also look at accuracy, dependability, handiness, you know, readiness to use, modern features, the usual suspects. But they do go a little bit further. They're not just looking at the gun, and they're not just looking at right here, right now. They're thinking of long term. In fact, the contract actually stipulates service and warranty, repair, even updates and modernizations for as much as 20 years. They're also thinking about what accessories does the manufacturer pack in with it? Or what else can we get? You know, what's the total package cost? And what I really like about this, they seem to have a very buy once, cry once attitude, but also on a budget. I guess that's why they didn't invite SIG in Newhausen, which was still sand back then. So I have to wonder if LMT offered more accessories and at a lower price point, or maybe they just like their customer service offerings. I don't know. Either way, in May of 2019, they announced that this here was the winner. The MARS L would become the R20, and for that matter, the R20S. And the MARS H would become the R20L, which was little confusing because sometimes I call it the R20H, and I probably will in this video, but you get the idea. The larger, kind of AR-10 inspired version. Although LMT calls this a 4th generation AR, and I would tend to agree. It's got a lot of cool features we'll get to in a minute. Original numbers seem to have been around 16,000 they were going to pick up, but by the time of the contract, 2019-2020, this seems to have been bumped up to around 19,000. At this point in time, the standing military in active service is just over 6,000 men. Half of those, give or take, are conscripts, half are just professional armies that are in. But they also have 35,000 reserves that can be called up that already have like billets assigned to them, so in case of war, they know exactly what to do. And then there's a small contingent, a few thousand more, of what they kind of consider volunteer defense reserves, volunteer defense units that are not really assigned anything, but they could be called upon. They have previous military training or other relevant skills, so dipping into it, you know, they could probably call on roughly 40,000 folks, arm them. So this really needs to at least get the frontliners equipped. Plus, they're going to get maybe up to 1,000 of the DMRs, at least 500. Gives you an idea. They're also going to pick up an LMT underbarrel grenade launcher as an optional feature. It's a 40 mil. I don't remember its exact name. It's basically a 203 type. And some other gibbity-goops and accessories to be kind of kitted out. And by 2020, July, the first rifles are delivered and shown to the public, and everything's kind of announced. And by the next year, the first full batch has been delivered. It seems to be 6,050 5.56 guns and 500 7.62 guns. And I think this number is actually important because that's just enough to arm the frontline people. Now, originally they had planned for this, or at least the R20S, to go to the Special Forces. But in February of 2021, they made the decision just to purchase roughly 100 HK 416, again, presumably A5s from Germany. They're small enough they can do what they want, Special Forces. Nevertheless, frontline units, scouts, reconnaissance, they're going to get these too. And after the initial delivery, there's to be a larger batch of about 18,000. Now, this number gets a little conflated. I'll mention it later. It's a little unclear if the 18,300 number you can read online is total, including the first 6,000, or in addition to them. It can be read either way, because the numbers don't quite add up properly. Once the front lines get them, and enough are in hands of reserves, some police, border guard, Ministry of Justice guys can get them, you know, and kind of trickling down the system, and that way the older Galeals and whatnot can be retired out. I think originally they were hoping to have everything delivered by 2022, but there was an event in the world, so the truth is the first full contract wasn't delivered until the end of 2023, and by which time it seems like they picked up all they're intending to, although the contract does allow for an extension, a follow-on, through at least next year, 2026, so it's possible they could order more, because Estonia does have plans to expand their military. As of this year, Estonia has a population of right under 1,370,000. That's a third the size of my state, Arkansas, which is just a little under like 3,900,000. Yeah. Again, for their size, they're really doing, but again, their neighbor. They still have roughly 6,000, 6,100 active, but they're expanding the reserves to nearly 40,000. I believe it's around 38 something right now. Plus, you've got around 4,000 in the volunteers. But they're hoping to expand that in the next couple of years to as many as 50,000 in the reserves. And maybe by 2030, 60,000. So that way they can call upon roughly 50,000 men in case of war. Keep in mind that, just because they're there on paper doesn't mean all of them can serve. And some of them are not ever going to be called upon at the same time. They're just, in reserve in case someone can't make it. So it kind of makes you wonder how many of these they're going to go with, because they are planning on using them for a couple of decades at the very least. And outside of those handful of 416s, the LMT is pretty much their standard gun. So I'm kind of curious if they're going to stick with it. I said earlier the numbers don't add up. You can read that number of over 6,000 original and a little over 18,300 add-on, which would lead you to think something in the 24,000 range. Also, the number of the 7.62 guns, you see 500, you see 1,000. But I haven't seen a confirmed second delivery after that initial 500. It absolutely could have been. I'm just saying there's not. So there's a little bit of a question about how many of those. There's also a bit of a question about how many of the R20Ss are there, the short barrel version, although that gets even muddier for one of the cool features of this gun we're about to get to. The modularity of everything here. But when you look at total numbers that Estonia has purchased, as opposed to just adding up the various contracts that have been reported, you see 19 to 20,000. That's a little less than 24 something. If you're in Estonia, if you know, let me know which is the correct number, because I would really like to know myself. I just, again, found it enjoyable. But that's where we're at as of middle of 2025. So now let's talk about the tech specs, the features of this guy, and talk about soldier response. Do they love it? Do they hate it? Has LMT been a great partner for Estonia? Have they been crappy? Do they regret their choice? Well, let's get in and find out. Let me just say, this is what every maker should do. Like I said, this is a reference rifle. I wish everyone who sells a semi-automatic gun in here would do this. Just do a limited production every year of a few of your contract guns for those of us who want to collect it. Now, for everyone else, yeah, get any of the other MARS variants, because this does have some limitations. It's not as good or whatnot as some of the commercial guns. That's not really why I want mil-spec. I'm not one of those guys that think mil-spec is just the best ever. I like it for the historical value, and, to quote the old cheesy History Channel, history's made every day, quack crap, but at least I don't use that saying to justify reality TV. Pawn Stars. Anyway, Colt's done a little bit like that. But what's good is I can point to this and show you pretty much almost identical to what Estonia has received. Markings are a little different. Of course, it's just semi and of course it's just safe and semi. The military version has auto, so at least they were smart enough not to want a burst mode, although in this day and age I don't think most people are. It is their current MARS ambidextrous lower and upper. It does have their quick removable barrel system. Not as quick as an AUG. It does actually have 2 bolts. You need a torque wrench, but very easy to do on the armorer level. This is a monolithic upper with about a 14.5-inch top rail, and then they wanted the M-lock compatible forearm, which I really like. There's a little bit of back and forth about mounting that grenade launcher on an M-lock system, but I guess they worked it out enough that they were happy. And they even ship them with these rail covers. I added extra ones, but I like a grippy grip. I know early on people were doing kind of replicas of the R20 in America. Everyone was putting a big light and a laser and foregrip and illuminator, but the reality is it seems like those are only ever attached, especially like the illuminators for special forces. Your average infantry probably doesn't have a whole lot more than maybe just a generic foregrip. We do have LMT's backup sights. I think it's interesting, this one's of course under the sight here, that they don't really lock in position. There's a good and a bad to that. The good thing is if they get hit, they'll just go down as opposed to snapping. The bad is, well, they're not as stable. The barrel, it's pretty heavy. It has a 1 in 7 twist, chrome lined. The standard R20 has a 363 millimeter barrel. Why such a weird number? I don't know. So basically 14.3. I have no idea. And it is half by 28 threads. And it comes with a suppressor ready. It's actually a GLX GT multi-caliber. You know, quick on, quick off. And this is again why I like the reference rifle. Obviously, at 14.3 inches, it's a little too long to really want to SBR it unless you're just hardcore. But too short to be legal, so they just permanently attach the muzzle device. And what's great about having compatibility with the suppressor is you don't even lose that. You can just snap it on. Now the R20S has a remarkably much shorter barrel of 310 millimeters. Yeah, 12.2 inches. Literally a difference of 2.1 inches. I think the idea is just to make it just a little bit shorter for a suppressor, because it also has one more difference in the gas system, gas regulator here. This is one of the areas too that you could say maybe the US commercial version is better, because the reference rifle as it sits here does not have an adjustable gas system, or rather it does, but it's just a single position. That's not by accident. Estonia debated keeping the more standard 2 position in here, but since this was going to go to conscripts, they didn't want it to get set wrong. Whereas the R20S, which is typically given to scout units, recon units, special forces, who often won't get the suppressor, it would have the 2-way. The nice thing is, this is totally modular. So if a person ends up with one of the suppressors, they actually just issue the suppressors with the alternative regulator. So it's very forward thinking. The funny thing is, another feature of this gas block is actually kind of backward thinking, a bayonet lug. Modern militaries really go back and forth on if they want to do a lug or not. And in the original contract, the original tender, I don't believe it cared one way or the other. It seems to be something that either LMT or Estonia just kind of threw on at the last minute, because they realized, hey, we've got bayonets knocking about from the old Galil days, and Galils have a Stanag lug. Now, probably just an M7, maybe an M9 is around. I just had my Icorn clone here, the Waffen technique. Either way, it's a modern European bayonet, so I threw it on. The funny thing is, they really haven't purchased new bayonets for these, and I haven't even really heard of photos with bayonets attached. But they figured, hey, we've got bayonets in stock. Maybe one day we'll need to use them. Putting a little lug on here doesn't really do anything. Doesn't hurt anything. Let's just have it in case we want it in the future. So LMT actually had to make a special gas block for that request, but, you know, it was pretty good. Moving on back. Like I said, ambi. Either side. And I do like that you can put this on safe with the trigger cocked or uncocked. That's a very European trend, and I do like it, because, you know, with your more North American style AR trigger grips, you can either have the safety on and the hammer cocked, or the hammer uncocked and the safety off. I don't see any harm this way. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not a high-speed, low-drag operator, so forgive me. We have a pretty well standard tube, but it is a dry film coated, so it's very slick and smooth. And the stock they picked was the Magpul SLK. which I generally like it. It's light and handy, but it has one kind of deficiency. It doesn't have a QD pocket. It's got regular sling slots, but I don't know. Yeah, there's a pocket back here on the receiver, but I would have liked it if the stock had one, but oh well. By the way, this is a Blue Force, a Vickers tactical sling. Not only is this what comes with the reference rifle, this is actually what LMT shipped on the R20 contract guns. And it does come with the QDs, you know, this one's stitched on. So it just would make sense to have that in the back, but either way, since they are kind of picking off-the-shelf components, there's going to be a little bit of compromise. The pistol grip, I really do like. It really reminds me of the old Wilson style. It's considered the LMT second generation ergonomic grip. It is ambi too. It has, you know, the bumps on either side for either hand. Has a small storage compartment. While they do use it to put small replacement parts in, it's pretty famous that on the contract guns, there's a kind of a microchip in there with the shot counter and other data. Yeah, I'm kind of glad the civilians don't have that, I'm not going to lie. But I do like the grip quite a bit. We have the enlarged winter trigger guard because it does get cold in Estonia. Again, the ambi safety is a perfectly good shape to me. And overall, the gun is quite compact, about 35 inches with this barrel, about 32 and a half with the S version. And again, you can easily pop out barrels and switch between them if you need to. But as I said, they were kind of looking at the full package, not just the rifle, accessories, and so on. The standard optic is a Holosun 515. There is a little bit of a specialized version for the reticles for the Estonian contract, but it's pretty much just your standard commercial one. It's kind of funny, they spent a good bit of money on the rifle, but I'm not going to say Holosuns are bad sights, but, you know, it's no Spectre like Germany's using. But it'll work, and if it serves them long enough, it's kind of a just consideration of the overall quality. This is standard, and sometimes that's about all the infantry gets. But oftentimes you'll see it with the Holosun 3-power flip magnifier bolted on for more long-range use. I would imagine this is especially true for the longer version barrel here. From there, if needed, there is a Holosun IR laser that can go on the forearm. The suppressor is in inventory if a person needs it. The underbarrel grenade launcher, what have you. And the standard magazine that is shipped and issued for these is the Magpul, presumably whatever current generation 3 or whatever they get. It beat out others like Lancer, no surprise there. I mean, Magpul is a good mag, and it does save them a little money. And a magazine, much like an optic, is a part that will wear out long before the rifle. At least it should if it's a well-built rifle. And with that, well, how has it been received in Estonia? Yeah, by 2021, several were in the hands of the infantry, especially frontliners. Now, these were supported, brought over, and worked with domestically by an Estonian company, Milrem, who partnered with LMT to kind of do service and warranty repair work in-house. And they've been dealing with the Estonian Defense Force for about 5-6 years at this time. And you get them out in the hands, and overall, soldiers really seem to like them. I definitely think they're feeling it more than their old and, frankly, getting to be worn-out Galils. I mean, some would criticize the R20 for maybe being a little heavy, even if it is short, because it is, 7.5 pounds, depending on how you have it kitted out. But compared to a Galil, especially like an ARM, it's lighter, it's more modern, and it's a lot easier to take apart, clean, maintain. There's interoperability. You're not having 2 or 3 different ones. So, yeah, soldiers generally liked it. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Special Forces, for reasons didn't. They went with the HK, so we got to be honest there. Of course, they don't have to worry about money. If money's no object, maybe Estonia would have gone with the HK. When you're buying 19, 20, maybe even 24,000 guns, depending on which number is accurate, I'm sure it came down to it. But it's not like LMT is inexpensive, but they're also not inexperienced. They have supplied over 40 militaries around the world. They've been in business since 1980 in one capacity or another. They made great receivers for the FAL, DSA back in the day. They've had New Zealand, British contracts, although, to be fair, the Estonian contract was one of their most important. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows. There were some criticisms about deliveries being slower than expected and quality control not being up to what they'd hoped for. I'm not going to let LMT completely off the hook, but this is 2020, 2021, 2022. We have to consider what's going on in the world in COVID. Everyone let it slip a little bit, even if they were trying their hardest, working with everything. It's amazing they were actually only about a year behind schedule delivering the last ones. But I'm not going to completely let them off the hook, but show me one company that wasn't accused of that, who's actually a major contractor. Everyone just kind of did. But it seems to have been received quite well, and I don't get the impression that LMT regrets their decision. It'll be interesting, though, to see by next year when the contract, the stipulation to order more expires, if they will order more because of their plans to expand the reserves. We've talked about the history to date. We've talked about features and service in Estonia. Now, what do I think about it? After having put several hundred, if not over 1,000 rounds through it by now, is it still a favorite of mine? Or have newer, maybe more modern, better guns kind of eclipsed it? Have I had any jams, failures? Have I had any parts breakages? Have I experienced any LMT QC issues? Because obviously I picked this up in that kind of time period too, when the reference rifles were available. What do I think about the cost? This is not cheap. Is it HK expensive? No. But it's not PSA cheap either. Is it worth the money? So for that, let's go over to Misha at the range and get some live feedback as we put some Phoenix ammo through it. Well, I'm about to tell you next time. I don't mean to tease, but I thought it would be good to just do kind of a look back at this gun for those who haven't seen the earlier videos, just as I did a look back at the MR556A4 here. I think it is kind of most honest to compare them with the short mag pull on the HK. It's closest to the handguard on the LMT. Yeah, you're comparing about a 14.3 inch barrel to a 16.5. What can you do? They both are quite heavy. But yeah, we're going to do the shooting in a separate video for those who aren't interested in either the histories and just want a head-to-head. I thought that would be better than kind of burying them together. What do you think? Trying it out. Let me know what you think in the comments. I do have thoughts. For example, accessing the gas system out front versus having to remove your handguard to get your gas system out top here. I definitely think the LMT is better. On the other hand, it would be difficult for the LMT to be more accurate than the HK, but we'll see. Another area I can tell you I do prefer are the controls here on the HK. The way the bolt latch on the right and mag catch is done. The LMT I really liked when it came out. We didn't get a lot of ambies when the Mars first came out, and I don't hate it. The bolt latch on the right's good, but the mag catch, I feel like, especially on this side, it's a little small and hidden. So I'm going to give that to the HK besides. On the other hand, though, there is something about this gun that is just really attractive. Plus, it's got a bayonet lug, and it is cheaper than the HK. Keep that in mind, too. And as I said earlier in the video, I love that this is a reference rifle made as close to spec as possible. Very nice trigger, very smooth bolt throw. Heckler & Koch, a little more expensive. I don't think these are as expensive as the internet thinks. It's a stiffer throw, but not harder. Trigger, I think the HK might have the edge, but they're real close. But is the HK worth the extra money, or would you be just as well suited with the LMT? Both are short stroke gas piston guns, but will any jams occur with different magazines? We'll find out. This is a standard AR magwell, and the A4 has a standard lower too. I didn't mention it in its video, but the original 416 and the MR556A1 had the kind of European style magwell, which wasn't 100% compatible with certain mags, but the newer guns have fixed that. And I think we're pretty close on the optics here. This is a copy of a Spectre, which is what the G95 uses. And these Hollow Suns, red dot and magnifier, are what Estonia uses. But unfortunately, I can't tell you much about optics. So yeah, part 3 will be just about shooting, not about history, for those who are more action-oriented. So check that out if you're interested. Let me know how you kind of like splitting these things up. Also, I posted both this video and the HK is early access over on Patreon. So if you'd like to help support over there, that'd be awesome. But if you can't, liking, sharing, subscribing, commenting, that's great too. I'm curious how many other folks own one of their reference rifles. And if so, is it a New Zealand, a British? What do you got? Let me know in the comments. This is Misha. Catch you very soon. Next time.